So today's topic is about supply chain. I mean, we've read about it in the papers, and on the news, how FUBAR, supply chain logistics is, and today, you and I are going to share some experiences and insights to the extent that we can, and so will our guests. Welcome to the Outliers Inn, produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonatech Consulting Group International, with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Outliers Inn. I'm JP, your host, and my co-host here today is Mule. How you doing today, Mule?
Oh, I'm kicking butt, as usual.
Kicking butt and taking that. Now, how many flights have you taken this year?
50, 55, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Now,
I
those
just got back
segments are
from
round
Phoenix.
trips.
Those are round trips.
Yeah, 50 round trip. That's pretty. You'll be up there in the captain's quarters there soon enough.
Yeah. So it's been a busy year. It's been a busy
Good.
year.
Yeah, same here. So today's topic is about supply chain. I mean, we've read about it in the papers, and on the news, how FUBAR, supply chain logistics is, and today, you and I are going to share some experiences and insights to the extent that we can, and so will our guests. Yeah. So, what's new on your end with supply chain logistics?
Well, I just came from a conference of retailers and suppliers here in the U.S. for, improving their physical logistics. And of course, everybody was talking about what's happening out on the West Coast with the containers. And that is, some people are arguing, was all predictable. And I agree with them that it was predictable. And over the past decade, we have fewer ocean liner companies, and they are sailing much, much bigger ships. And yes, capacity grew, but capacity went from lots and lots and lots of smaller ships to these bigger mega ships. And the mega ships require mega ports with mega facilities with cranes and extra space for containers. And now you have you need much bigger space. But those aren't really pretty to people. And so, when you have really tall stacks, it's not really pretty to see these tall stacks. And so in Southern California, the cities around the port said, you can't stack 5 high. You can only stack 2 high. They passed ordinances, and inside the ports, it was okay. But outside the ports, where there are a lot of these overflow yards, no, you can only stack 2 high instead of 5 high. And so when COVID hit, all of the empties that were trying to go back to China piled up, and they filled up every single yard they could. And there's still a lot of empties sitting on the West Coast where you want to put full ones to get out. And so it's the battle of the empty container going back against the full container is part of the weirdness of what's going on. It's just been hilarious and sad to listen to the trouble that a lot of retailers have in getting their product. 5x on the container cost. So, went from $4,000 to $6,000 a container to $20,000 a container. And that's significant.
I tell you, here I am in Germany. We talk about the worldwide supply chain logistics issue, worldwide. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the World Series, though, in reality, because Europe doesn't seem to be having that challenge. Okay, they, just like ships coming from Taiwan, or wherever out in Asia. I mean, everybody that consumes a chip is having supplier issues getting their hands on the chips. Okay, but once they're on a container, getting them to Europe, getting them to the customer doesn't seem to be the challenge that it is in the States. You don't hear about Rotterdam or Gdansk or Hamburg being backed up. I mean, you had Brexit of course, and that kerfuffle with 30 days notice. But you don't even hear about that anymore. At least I don't hear in Europe. So this whole worldwide problem doesn't actually seem to be worldwide, or it's certainly not evenly distributed. I think that the states, the issues in the states are magnitude greater than elsewhere.
True. And the issues in the States are because of the physical network between Asia and the West Coast US. All of this, everything that you hear about it in the US press is, this backup in the port and, the worry about, well, we have product for Christmas. Oh, yeah, we have it. Retailers have a lot of inventory. I can tell you that. I know a lot of retailers are like, we at least have some to put on the shelf for Black Friday. We'll sell out, and that's okay. And they're okay with selling out, but they'll at least have it for Black Friday. But it's all really focused on the failure of this logistics system. And you've got all of our supply chain is systems of systems, right? These are all complex. The complexity of it is how many systems you've put together to move stuff from point A to point B, and how many people are involved or companies are involved. So you've got the complexity of it. Where's the risk in that complexity? The problem that's happened, the risk into the US has been all of this volume is now very much slowed down getting through that port of Los Angeles. And it's just because it's choked. It can't process enough. There's not enough buffer space to store containers to completely empty a ship or to refill the ship. And so the other problem is these ships are going, no, don't put any empties on. I'm going to take off. And so the empties continue to pile up on the West Coast. That's another problem that nobody's talking about, but it's out there. So it's the problems in other supply chains are more like, did the mine shut down? There are problems here in the US with plastics because of the power failure that happened in Texas this past winter. So there's some other pretty cool supply chain failures that happened. Some of them, I wouldn't say COVID related at all. Other ones, oh yeah, COVID gave it the shaft.
Yeah. So, are people going to be able to get the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip? That's the big question.
Yeah.
For Christmas.
Yeah. For most of the hot stuff, there's the retailers that I talk to, they have what they need to have for Christmas. They just don't have deep stock. And there's some stuff that it won't be there for Black Friday, but it will arrive after Black Friday, but before Christmas, and they'll end up having it, get out there, and it will move and they'll be happy. So happy customers.
So the U.S. Congress has just passed, and Biden has just signed the infrastructure bill. It's like whatever $1 trillion worth of dollops of cash, and that should fix everything by the new year, right?
No, of course not. But you got to remember that the piece of bread that big dollop of peanut butter is getting spread across is fairly broad. And there's some pieces of it that I wouldn't call infrastructure bread. I'd call it more like, social platform bread. But it got mixed into the batter. It's like that black and white swirl rye bread. There's some of it. There's some of it that isn't infrastructure, but it's in the bread. And so it gets peanut butter too spread over it. And you look at the amounts of money getting spent in any individual area, and it is a big peanut butter spread. And so is it enough money to move the needle? For some things it is. For other things, all it is amount of money for Band-Aid. It's okay, this will take care of some capital that you haven't had for the past couple of years. Go make that happen. And some of those projects are needed because those smaller projects are smaller U.S. highway bridges across creeks, that are tying secondary cities together. And those are some of the bridges that are crumbling really quickly, are those secondary bridges.
So here's a question regarding the ports, because I think it's government's responsibility to maintain the interstate highways and the bridges. That is wholly within their domain. Railroads aren't owned by the government.
Correct.
They're owned by companies. Okay. The same with the ports. I don't believe the ports are owned by the government. The ports are owned by companies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, some ports are merely a landlord. And so their rent is tied to how much business you push through, things like that. But they're landlords. There's other ports that, no, they aren't landlords at all. They own it. It's their business, and they can license it. And they license it to terminal operators. And so you have to, that structure, that second structure I described, happens quite a bit in other countries.
Okay, so in the States, frankly, I really don't give a crap who pays for it. I think that if it's owned by a company, the company should pay for it and pass their fees on to whoever uses their services.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the countervailing idea is you have trucks that are operating on public highways, but they pay a road use tax.
Of course,
that's greater than what automobiles pay because they're doing commercial and bigger vehicles.
Yeah, but we all know that just goes into the general fund. It's to borrow from Al Gore.
Oh, of course,
it doesn't go into a lockbox.
No, right? It goes into a big pot of money, and then out of that big pot of money, here's the transportation money, and it's always nowhere near what went in.
Right,
it comes back out for transportation, and that's why there's bond initiatives, things like that. States are doing a pretty good job right now. All of the states, if you look at what their tax revenue is up.
Yeah.
So their tax revenue is up, and that there's a lot of activity, at least here in Virginia, of the state fund, getting a lot of roads built. But what they did is they issued bonds that are going to be paid by tolls that, because of the high occupancy toll lanes that they're adding, along with the additional public lanes. And it's been amazing to me to watch I-66 west of Washington, D.C. through Virginia, because they're changing that from 8 lanes each way to 14 lanes each way in some sections.
Holy shit. Yeah. I got to tell you a funny story. 1979, I lived in Manassas, Virginia. Route 66 didn't reach it. Whenever I'd go from Manassas into DC, we'd take the George Washington Parkway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's 14 lanes. That's ridiculous.
Well, it will be. Ridiculous. There's going to be some sections that it will be. So through Fairfax County, but yeah. So it's the whole thing. It's been interesting. I think that there's some other folks that can chime in on some of their, because I listen to, over 75, 80 people tell me different stories about their challenges. And I could go on for hours about what I heard from these retailers. But we've got some other guys here that perhaps have some more entertaining stories than I do, because most of the stories I heard were kind of sad. It was not good news. So
you want to invite our first guest up to the bar?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna see if Andy wants to step up. Is Andy out there?
Oh yes, I'm here.
Oh. So how's it going out there, Andy?
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, to be honest. You guys are talking about sort of shortages and the like, and I dare say there are some. But, being in the UK, we had this petrol and diesel crisis, probably about a month ago now, where I don't know if you heard about it, but the press in the UK reported that I think 7 filling stations had run out. And as a result of that, we had about 7 to 10 days of queuing outside every single petrol station, just because people were absolutely paranoid. And there are a number of issues behind this. There's reckoned to be, and the JP, you'll confirm that there's the same in Europe. There's an HGV driver shortage, and that's for a number of reasons in the UK, which remind me to come back to later. So there are some drivers short, but basically everybody just got a panic on. And it's the same when we got the first COVID lockdown. You could not buy a toilet roll anywhere.
Right. You had your toilet paper moment a second time.
Because everybody's suddenly gone and bought 96 toilet rolls. They haven't got anywhere to store them, but they bought 96 toilet rolls just in case. Jesus, how many toilet rolls do you go through?
I'm with you on that, Andy. But I got to ask a question here about the gas, because we had in the States, on the East Coast of the States, one of the major distributors of fuel had a ransomware attack. And I saw videos that were just absurd of people, putting gas into I'm not shitting you, into plastic garbage bags.
Yeah,
the plastic and they're filling up the friggin' plastic garbage bags filled with gas, and then they put them in their car to drive them home. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I think it was in it must have been like late 2000, early 2001. We actually had a tanker driver strike in the UK. Didn't achieve much because the wage rates are still pretty dismal, which is one reason why we have a shortage. But in 2001, the police got called to somebody's house, and because they apparently had petrol stored dangerously. And I cannot believe I'm saying this, but when the police arrived, they said, "There's been a report of, Mr. Paris, what have you to say for yourself?" Mr. Paris went to his plastic garbage bin in his garden and opened it up, full of petrol. And it's like, first of all, I'm not. You guys are smart guys. I'm not going to tell you how wrong that is and how many levels it's wrong on.
Yeah.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So yeah, but I find consumer actions, consumer thought processes really confusing sometimes. I mean, we live in a time of plenty. At least the people in the Western world do. So why are you going out and buying 96 toilet rolls and you can't get any hand sanitizer and all that sort of thing? I mean, one of the problems we had in the early days of COVID was the hospitals running short of PPE. Now, I'm pretty sure there was probably enough in the country, but of course, if you're a hospital and you are kind of running short and you phone up your supplier and you say, "JP, how much PPE have you got?" And you say, "I've got a gazillion boxes. I'm going to buy a gazillion boxes just in case." So we've all lived in the lean world. It's the bullwhip effect, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the habit, and this was something that all these retailers I spoke to this past week had said is they've pretty much, their bosses understand that they have to go from just in time to just in case. And that if I've got the chance to pick this up and pick up some extra inventory on something we think that we're going to sell well and sell through, then we're going to pick it up. And that was,
or if it's critical, or if it's a critical item.
If it's a critical product. And you're hearing it more on the manufacturing side too. The manufacturing, I had some folks talk to me about how can I do this in this kind of space? They need to store products and they need to store it in the warehouses that are available. And there's a couple of them I've said, you can't put your stuff in that building. Sorry, it will, the fire department will have a problem with that. So, but there's been other products that, they're banking up when they can. And then also I've got a building project that's now set back 4 more weeks because we can't get the steel studs.
Well, there does seem to be a bit of a lack of building products in the UK. Price of timber appears to have gone through the roof. But just to pick up on this, the warehousing thing, there's a lot of warehousing going to be grabbed over the next sort of 6, 9, 12 months, I guess. And I've just updated it for the brave new COP26 world. But I wrote an article probably about a decade ago now, and I got a call from somebody in one of the London boroughs. I have no idea how they got my number. I have no clue which mailing list I was on, but I got a phone call. No, actually, I tell a lie. I got an email saying, "Come and attend our 1-day workshop. How green is your warehouse?" So I picked up the phone, dialed the number at the bottom of the email, and said, "Hello, you've invited me to. Yes, would you like to come?" I said, "Well, to be honest," I said, "you're asking the wrong question." "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, the greenest warehouse is the one that doesn't exist. I mean, if you want to use fewer resources, then don't have a massive building that you have to keep warm. Oh no, it's pharmaceuticals. Keep cool. Staff it, pay for the fork truck, light it, run the computer system that runs it, and give 101 other things that it costs to actually run a warehouse."
Mm-hmm.
And she went, "Do you want to come to this or not?" And I was like, "No, I'm okay."
So Andy, I got to ask you a question here. We have all these ships that are hanging out, waiting to be unloaded in Newark and in LA and other places. Is there a backlog of ships waiting to get into Southampton?
I think there is some, but it's very limited. I think we did actually hit a bit of a crisis. And I think it's Tilbury, which is on the Thames, just out in the Thames estuary. Tilbury actually got landlocked about 2 weeks ago, and they had to back everything up because it was the classic thing. And I think, Mule, you alluded to it. They couldn't get stuff in because they can't take any stuff out. And yes, I believe they were stacking 5, 6, 7, and 8 high at the time, and they still didn't have enough space.
Yeah, but it's not the catastrophe that we're seeing in the States, or that is being seen in the States.
Not from a logistics point of view, because I think the stuff hasn't come from China. For whatever reason, it's not that it's held up at the ports.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sorry if your nephew or your grandson or your granddaughter or whatever doesn't get that cheap Chinese toy that they really wanted.
Right.
But what did I say about COP26? Should we really be doing that? I think there's a whole load of discussion around the sort of the brave new green world, and just buying containers full of tat out of China.
Those boys want the GI Joes with the kung fu grip. So speaking of kung fu, there, yeah.
Kung fu grip.
Why don't we invite Don, who's a 15 level black belt. You there, Don?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome.
Oh boy, I'll try and condense this because this can get, I have to. I'll take off from where Dave left off as far as the supply chain and stuff like that, because I've just had issues with trucking. I have stuff going down to Tucson, and it took me almost 2 weeks just to try and find a truck to get it. And usually, you call them up and they can schedule it within a couple of days, but it took a while just to find somebody. And I was reading an article that what they had done was they had changed the drug testing laws. And instead of, somebody got a negative or a positive test for drugs, what they do is just go to the place down the road and, they'd keep working. Well, they changed that. So apparently there's a database that's tracking these guys, and it took 72,000 truck drivers off the road to start with. And then what the other problem is what they're doing is they're basically, since COVID came around, all the rest stops, they've been closing them down because they haven't had anybody there to maintenance them. And so they're closing them down. So the trucks have no place to park except for these travel stops. And then when they go to these travel stops, they have to actually book a spot in advance, and they're charging them now like $20, $25 a night. So these guys really have no place to, that's the only place these guys got to go. And since there's no restaurant workers at these places because they can't either find them or, COVID laws or whatever, they have nothing to eat. So it's just, this whole thing has just been piling on and piling on and piling on. And then the other problem is we touched on the chip shortage a little bit. And apparently within 6 months, everybody is supposed to be, have the phones available that will actually run the software that will track them. So their logs are on their phone and stuff like that. Well, since there's a chip shortage, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to get all the phones that they need. And I can't remember how many he was talking about drivers are going to pull off the road because of that, because they don't have the proper equipment. And then go back to the parking situation, lots of times you'd see trucks pulled off of exit ramps and stuff like that. Well, or you see them, if you're pulling into a rest stop, you'd see them pulled off to the side of the road. Well, state troopers are going in and telling them, hey, you got to move it. So here's this guy just been gotten 2 hours worth of sleep, and now the state troopers are going in and telling him he's got to move his rig because he can't park there. So where's he going to take it? And after 2 hours of sleep, he's only supposed to be driving a certain amount of time. Where's he going to go?
Yep.
Okay. So behind the wheel. Now I got to just interject here. I mean, these are all man-made problems.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Correct.
I mean, this kind of shit is just easy to fucking fix. All right.
But they won't do
it. You know what? Let the truck drivers park. Open up the freaking rest stops. What if they don't have toilet paper? Tell the truckers to make sure you bring your own toilet paper. And he's got a lot. Maybe you'll loan him. He's been hoarding it over there in the UK.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe
really.
he's got enough he could. So yeah. These are all man-made problems.
Just put porta potties out there so they
even
can
the
go
drug.
in.
Yeah. Even the drug testing. Most of the drug testing that comes back positive is for marijuana. You know what I mean? I'd like to see them drug test everybody in Congress. I'd like to see everybody piss in a cup in Congress and see how many of them come back positive for marijuana and their staff. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. So, and in a time of crisis, we sacrifice, utopia for reality.
Correct.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, this is what we'd like to do. We can't do it because of all of this confluence of challenges that have occurred. So we just not, even in New York, they did away with plastic grocery bags, right? COVID comes along. Well, plastic grocery bags are okay for the next couple of years. So we'll bring them back for a while. So it's just like, we just got to get the frig out of our own way.
Well, take the plastic bags. I mean, if you ever went and shopped at Sam's Club doesn't have any bags, or you bring your own, or you take boxes that are there, and they've never had a problem with it. I mean, if you want to get rid of plastic bags, why don't you just, instead of inducing legislation, why don't you just kind of ask companies to have people supply their own bags, or give them an alternative,
or provide an alternative. These things called paper bags.
Yeah. And they recycle quite well.
Yes. And they come from a renewable resource.
Yeah.
But getting back to supply, I have to make here.
Getting back to supply chain real quick though, as far as the brewing goes, haven't had any issues yet.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Okay. So the grain
Still
is
can
still
get
going. You
grain.
still got hops. Okay.
We
Good.
still, yep, we can get yeast and the whole 9 yards. There's a crop,
Mhm.
all that stuff out there. So we're in good shape there.
Awesome. I have a confession. We were talking about PPE a little bit earlier, right? A little bit of a confession there that I wanted to see how long one of these masks would last. So I wore the same mask for pretty much 8 months before one of the straps broke. One of those little blue ones. All right.
Oh God.
in fact, I had it there in Florida when we're traveling back and forth before I got my Manchester United mask. And yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this wasn't your only mask you wore.
No,
You
it was
wore
the only
other
mask No. I had the same mask every day that I had to wear a mask.
Uh-huh.
Mind you, I didn't have to wear a mask every day, right? I
Right.
mean, I work out of my house. I don't go to the grocery store too awful much. I never wore one out for a walk because I just think that was stupid, on its surface. So it's
Right.
not like I wore the mask every day, and I wasn't flying 50 times a year like you did this year. So so in all honesty, I was probably wearing that mask twice a week, but it lasted about 8 months before it
Disintegrated.
Before it disintegrated.
Well, I gotta interject. You go back to supply chain here. We go back to the chips. Now, since I'm in the equipment business and stuff like that, and I deal with circuit boards and circuit board assembly, that's getting to be to the point where, well, you look at the automotive industry, you got cars stocking up and everything else like that. But also from a point is if people can't get the chips, and if they can't, and it's not just the microprocessors that are a problem. It's starting to get down to capacitors, just your regular chips and stuff like that. If this continues, what's going to happen is that, people are going to scale production down. They're not going to be buying equipment. They're not going to be hiring people. It's going to have another cascading effect here too.
See, one of the things I'm concerned about, Don, is that there's a lot of equipment out in the material handling that now has intelligence on board. And so in the old days, you'd get this piece of conveyor and then you'd have to run wires to where you wanted the motor controller and you wired up all the discrete parts. Now it's a CAN bus system and you connect them together and each section has has a motor with its VFD already built into it and it snaps together like Lego. And there's a lot of these systems that there's a big demand for them now because everybody wants to build these new fulfillment centers. And I'm seeing lead times go out 13 weeks and then no 26 weeks, no 42 weeks. And when you ask the question, they come back and they say, yeah, we don't have the controls hardware.
Yeah, some of the stuff is going out. You're talking a year and a half now. Yep. This really puts a damper on manufacturing 4.0 and IoT. Yep. It's really because if they don't have all that stuff, there's not going to be a lot of people who are going to be able to upgrade and do it.
Yeah. Anybody who is figuring growth on IoT is going to need to, scale back or, put a pause. And it may not even be a pause. It may be, you down a little bit before you climb back up again.
Right. Yeah. Until this shortage gets, they're talking 2023 before you're going to see too much of relief.
Right.
Yeah. Scary stuff.
Yeah. I have to wonder about that though. You know what I mean? It's like, is the problem production? Is the problem, logistics?
Well, it's yes. Yes. It's a lot of stuff. It's like over in Thailand, one of the plants over there, they're at a lower capacity because they've had a drought and you need a lot of water to process in the manufacturing process to process the microprocessors. And so they're cut back on production. Then a lot of these places that got hit with COVID, you look at India and stuff like that, and they just got absolutely killed with COVID. So what's happening is their production rates are down and because they don't have the people because people are sick. China, they're probably doing okay, but the problem is that where is all the chips going? Since everybody's been staying home, it's going into TVs, phones, your home entertainment stuff.
Yep.
That's where a lot of the chips have been going. So And who's gonna get the chips? Whoever's gonna cough up the most money. I mean, it may seem weird, but Samsung versus Ford or GM is going to use more chips than the automotive industry does. So guess who's going to be the ones in last in line?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Especially
right. Like our friends there in Smithville Flats.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What was that, Don? Or Mule?
And especially when Samsung is a manufacturer of chips and a consumer of chips.
Correct. They got their priorities.
They have their priorities straight.
So yeah, that's kind of my dissertation on, some of the stuff that I've had to deal with. And, I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. I really don't. I mean, I know they're building plants in the US to help with the chip shortage, but they're building one in Arizona. Okay. Arizona's a desert. There's not a lot of water there. Where is the water going to come from? And I don't know if they really took a look at this.
Well, actually, Intel has a huge operation there in Chandler, and Motorola had a massive operation there. While there's no water on the surface, there's a lot of water underneath the ground.
Well, they got a big aquifer there.
They got a big aquifer to pull off of, and that's what
so
they're
where
doing.
you gonna get the water?
Yeah,
isn't that the prisoner of Fifth Ave or something like that, wasn't it? Where are you gonna get the water? So,
well, even yet, they're still talking. But those plants take, 3 years to bring up.
Oh yeah,
and to get them into production.
Yeah,
that's going to take a while.
That's going to take a while for them to spin that up. But and there's some other industries that will have some challenges spinning up the way that they need to.
Right.
So yeah, this will have I keep telling people what this is creating is waves, and we have whipsaw waves that are going to happen, but we have longer waves. These waves are more trend instead of being something that is event driven. It is more trend driven, and COVID pushed the trend lines up for things. I keep telling retailers that the lines between brands and retailers really got obliterated because there's so many brands that went, I'm going to skip retail. I'm going to go direct to consumer, and I'm going to spend more money and spend more time, going direct to consumer, and whole brands that have completely skipped retail. And that's something else that I didn't think I would see for another 10 years, but it happened. And it was already happening, but COVID just gave it a big, giant kick in the ass.
So I got to ask around questions. The question I have for everybody, I know Don expressed that he had a hard time finding a truck for a shipment, but at the personal level, okay, have you been impacted at all? And if so, what was that impact? Me personally, my family, zero impact on the supposed supply chain / logistics issue. Now, I expressed already that I was am here in Europe, and we don't seem to have the problems that have been reported in the States. So maybe that's part of it. But we have had zero impact on supply chain or logistics. What about you guys?
Well, I think we've seen occasional gaps in the shelves in the supermarkets, but it's not like a plague of locusts have been through. So okay, we ran out of mushrooms and more coming tomorrow. Okay, but just as an interesting point, I was dispatched into Winchester today, the old ancient capital of England, to buy my mother some tights, as you do. Went to
like flying kites, the kites that you fly.
No, tights.
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 The tights you wear.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Get me clear, get me 30 denier, get me blah blah. Okay, right. I'll see what I can do. And I went into a well-known retailer here. JP, you're almost certainly aware of M&S, Marks and Spencer.
Yeah.
They're a sort of a top end retailer in the UK. And apparently there is a worldwide shortage of clear 30 denier tights. But we can have opaque if you want. But no, she doesn't want opaque. She only wants clear. But other than that, no effect.
Yeah, very, very strange stuff. Like, and when I was in the States, I went to the supermarket, and for some reason or another, the vegan shelves are always completely stocked.
Yeah,
there can be a shortage of everything, but
up in the reduced aisle.
Yeah,
right. Or because they've timed out.
Yeah. So, how about Dave and Mule and Don?
I travel to between here on the East Coast in Northern Virginia, and I fly out to Salt Lake City every other week. And this time last year, I was flying every week. It was just finishing up that project that I was flying every week. And so when I'm out there, I cook all my own meals. And so I make my own eggs for breakfast, and they have a barbecue at the hotel. So I buy groceries. And in buying groceries, I'm surprised. I understand a price difference because Utah, Salt Lake City is out there in the middle of Utah, and they have to truck a lot of stuff in. So there is a price differential I expected, but not as big as I see. And it's very much distorted from what I'm used to buying as far as prices. It's about twice as much for some of the basic staples. And the other staples, eggs, same price, milk, same price, but everything else much, much higher. And I've been really surprised of seeing that and how much it will go up and how empty their shelves will get, where I don't see it here. So it is, I think it's, there's still pockets where shortages happen. I think that there's, because it's not grand failure. You've got every day close to 700,000 tractor trailers moving at any point in time in the United States. And if there's a 5% reduction in that because the drivers have been held up or they're sick or they're not feeling well or they got tied up waiting on the dock because of other breakdowns in this complex system, then sometimes shelves don't get restocked in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot more of that here, but I know that my big difference is that it seems like I'm in a land of plenty here outside of the District of Columbia.
It's interesting that you mentioned a couple things like milk and eggs is about the same price, but I would have guessed that those are more or less sourced locally or regionally.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed, yeah. So you're taking out the fuel costs, all the transportation costs compared to the things that have to be dragged in from outside. And another interesting thing that I found here recently is it's been in papers. Inflation is 6.2% in the States, right? I mean, and up to January. It was running at about 1.5, 1.7%. I don't know what happened in January, but from January of this year to now, it's been 6.2%. Anyway, something happened in January. I don't know what happened in January, but something big.
You guys aren't going to go down that road, are you?
No.
We're just giving it a drive-by. We're just giving it a drive-by. Woo!
Okay.
So anyway. Where was I going with this? Yes.
I don't
know.
When
there's inflation of 6.2%, it basically means that the dollar has weakened, right? Your purchasing power has gone down by 6.2%.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, the dollar has actually strengthened against both the pound and the euro. In fact, just a few months ago, it was $1.20 to buy a euro, and now it's $1.14 in a fraction. Okay, so it makes, and Europe's inflation rate is 3.1% or something like that. So it just makes me wonder, what's going on with, the relationship between inflation and currency value. Because, we're buying a lot of stuff still from outside of the United States. And so that just struck me as odd. No comments. Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah.
What's that?
I don't know if the currency value change is enough to overtake all of the input costs along the way. And
No.
all the input costs are getting hammered. So, you name the industry and there will be 2 or 3 input costs that are just getting hammered. Cost, for price, because it's a commodity, it's metal, it's copper, it's steel, or it's grain, or it's this, or it's that. And there's some commodities that are still kind of depressed, but not very many. Coffee is up. All these commodities have gone up. Why? Because we pumped all sorts of money into the economies. So where's it go? So this inflation is getting felt. We measure it here, but we have no idea really how bad the inflation is in some of these other countries, unless you educate yourself and read about Brazil and some of these other wonderful lands that, oh yeah, they're getting whipsawed just as bad.
Right.
It's just a different thing whipsawing them. It's not any one big thing. Yes, we call it the supply chain, but there is all sorts of global trade, and currency value is the other side of global trade. And because you got currency involved in making the trade. So both of those are lockstep together. And when you look at some of the other trade valuations of countries, we're getting pretty lucky. And I think that we're performing nice against the euro, but there's other countries that are getting slaughtered.
Yeah. Well, everybody here is going to be able to get their GI Joe at the Kung Fu Grip if that's what you want this Christmas, right? Yeah. Everybody's going to. I understand that the price of a Thanksgiving dinner might be a little bit higher this year, but other than that, a lot of noise. But so far, I haven't really seen any tangible impact except for the increases in pricing.
Well, I'm just wondering what's going to happen when some of the stock wears down, because I know one of the things one of the guys was talking about, the guy who works on our cars. Well, he just had one of his lifts break. They were talking about 1.5 years to get another one in there to replace it. There was one lift that he wanted to get, and he actually gave him a down payment on it, and they sent his down payment back, and they told him it's going to be 3 years because they don't have the steel to make this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going to, if things are going to catch up to it. And he was also talking, he says pretty soon brake rotors are going to be, hard to come by, and just, your basic parts. So hopefully everything catches up by the time it gets to that point.
Well, people like Gary, as you pull it, will be doing a good business.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. There's some concern there that I share with it, because on the auto parts side, there's so many of those steel wearable parts that aren't made here anymore. They are China.
Oh, most everything's made over there.
Yeah.
Well, one of the stories, one of our friend up in Smithville Flats was sharing with me, he's having one of his motors in his car has got to come out and get, probably rebuilt. And he was talking to the factory that actually builds it. And this guy says he can't get camshafts, he can't get crankshaft. He says he's got all sorts, he's backed up like 200-300 motors. Mm-hmm. He can't get parts.
Yep.
So, and it's kind of high performance stuff. So it's not necessity, but Yeah,
and he's got as many cars as Jay Leno, just about. So
yeah, no kidding.
So it's not like he's going to be hurting for transportation.
No, that's what he said. He made that comment not too long ago. He says it was something to the nature of, what am I going to drive? And I'm just looking at him going, you got 6 cars.
Yeah. Maybe we'll be able to keep up with them.
Yeah, really.
So
What do you, hey, Andy, what do you think it's going to look like for the rest of the year there in the UK? What's the next craziness that will happen?
Don't. Where to start? Deep breath. We've apparently, it's interesting what you say, JP, about inflation at sort of 6% in the US and 3% in Europe. It was there was talk. I mean, I believe we're currently around just short of 3%, but it's predicted it's going to go up to as high as 5%, but then it'll drop back. And it just seems to be quite simply everything just catching up. You know, so the factories are reopening. People are coming off furlough. I don't know if you had furlough schemes in the US and the like, but the furlough ended beginning of this month, I believe. So the people have been saying, oh, well, of course, the doom mongers have been saying that there are going to be an extra gazillion people unemployed, and it just hasn't happened.
yeah.
In fact, there are more job opportunities than ever. So what's next year going to bring? I hope there's no more COVID. But my suspicion is that, you know, we're probably going to be tolerating an amount going forward, I don't know, for the next decade, until we get this sort of mythical herd immunity. Not helped, of course, by people that insist on wearing the same mask for 8 months at a time, but that's probably a different
I get that. You know, it's interesting that you say that, Andy, because the U.S. Federal Reserve, the bank to the banks in the States, is not over anxious of raising rates, which is usually what they do when inflation is as high as it is, because like you, they think it is making up for lost time. Mm-hmm. That people have been, that the demand has always been there, but not satisfied. And now it's coming back all at once as people are allowed to start living their lives again. But their anticipation is, as you suggested in the UK, is that, supply will catch up with demand will be satisfied, and the demand will go back to norms. And as will inflation as a result. So I guess we'll see.
I mean, that's exactly what the Bank of England did. They were going. No, did they? I believe they didn't move interest rates this month, but there's talk that they will potentially next month. But they were having that, exact same discussion. The doom mongers were saying, "Oh, get in before inflation runs away." But the problem is, if they raise interest rates, they potentially choke off the recovery.
Yeah.
So
that's.
But I mean, we've got an interest rate of 0.1%, and it hasn't been that. It hasn't been that since, what is it?
Yeah,
1684 or whatever.
Yeah. So, well, I think that we should wrap this up. What do you think there, Mule?
Well, I think that we've thoroughly thrashed this topic for today.
Yeah. The one thing I am going to take away from this, though, is that certainly the challenges, to the extent that they exist, is predominantly in the United States and not elsewhere. That's one thing I'm getting out of this, at least the pain part. But the second thing I'm really getting out of this is that the pain so far is not reaching us individually. You know what I mean? In the States, it's not really having an impact at the individual level, at least yet in the States.
And it's very extremely limited, and it's, are you missing your chair? A construction project pushed back 4 weeks, so you don't get to move in. I mean, there are some things that people do feel because they've got things they're waiting for to happen in their life, but it is not monumental. I don't
Right.
think that anybody's missing any surgeries for it, or, I'm not hearing stories about the supply chain hurting people and their health care. So I think that where it's failing, where the supply chain is failing, is where it really doesn't matter
So far.
so far.
And those big projects that you're talking about, I've never seen a big project that was on time, on budget, and delivered everything it was supposed to deliver, right? So if it wasn't the supply chain problems and you couldn't get your I-beams, then it would be some knucklehead at some government agency that didn't get a permit or didn't see the results, or wasn't happy with the results, or somebody didn't want it in their backyard or something. There's always going to be something. You know what I mean? But as long as people could get their milk and their eggs, their bread, their toilet paper, we need to make sure we have ample supplies of toilet
be able to
paper.
wipe.
And maybe some white tights or clear tights, right? Andy, is that what it is? Clear tights?
Yeah.
The impact will be minimal. So,
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thanks a lot for joining us at the end.
Thank you.
I guess there's only one thing left to say.
Hey, don't drive like my brother.
And don't drive like my brother. You have been listening to another episode of the Outliers Inn with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider. This program is produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonatech Consulting Group International.